The FIA just admitted something they never wanted to say, and it could change Formula One forever. After only 3 races, after a driver revolt, after a 50G crash that shook the entire paddock, the people in charge are now being forced to fix a system they spent years building. Because here's what's really happening. Cars are losing half their power, instantly, at over 300 kilometers per hour. Drivers can't predict it. Teams can't control it. And the FIA can't ignore it anymore. This isn't just a bad start to a new era. This is a full-blown crisis. Drivers calling it unpredictable. Teams calling it unfixable. Fans leaving faster than anyone expected. And behind the scenes, emergency changes are already being prepared. But here's the twist. The real mistake isn't what you think. And what the FIA is about to change next could either save Formula One or completely break it. Stay with me. At first, it didn't look like a mistake. It looked like progress. A bold step forward. Smaller cars. Cleaner energy. More advanced technology than ever before. Everything about the 2026 rules was designed to send one message. Formula One was evolving. But what nobody realized was how fragile that evolution actually was. Because hidden inside this new system was a contradiction. One that didn't show up in presentations. One that didn't appear in simulations. Only on track. At full speed. Under pressure. This is where everything starts to unravel. The entire concept depended on one key idea. Half electric power. Half combustion. Perfect balance. But to make that happen, something critical had to be removed. A system that used to stabilize energy delivery. A system that made power predictable. Without it, the entire behavior of the car changed. Not gradually. Not smoothly. Violently. Because now, the battery has to do everything. Store energy. Release energy. Recover energy. All in aggressive cycles. And when that cycle breaks, the car doesn't weaken. It collapses. Instantly losing a massive portion of its power. Right in the middle of racing conditions. This is the moment drivers started to realize something was wrong. Because this wasn't just difficult. It was uncontrollable. They couldn't rely on the car anymore. Couldn't predict it. Couldn't trust it. And in Formula One, trust is everything. Without it, you don't push. You hesitate. And hesitation, at this level, changes everything. But here's the detail that makes this even more serious. This behavior doesn't happen at the same time for every car. Each team manages energy differently. Each system reacts differently. So on the same straight, one car can be at full power. Another, losing everything. And that creates something Formula One has never truly had before. Extreme speed differences, in real time. Not because of skill. Not because of setup. Because of the system. And this is exactly what drivers started warning about. Not as a complaint. As a prediction. Because when one car suddenly slows down, and another is still accelerating, the outcome becomes inevitable. And that inevitability is what forced the FIA into action. But here's where things take a deeper turn. Because this wasn't just a technical oversight. It was a design choice. The removal of that stabilizing system wasn't an accident. It was intentional. Done to reduce costs. To simplify the engines. To attract new manufacturers. All valid reasons. All logical decisions. But when those decisions came together, they created something no one fully anticipated. A system that works in isolation, but struggles in reality. And now, the FIA is facing the consequences of that decision. Because every problem we're seeing traces back to that single change. And the worst part is, they can't simply reverse it. They can't just bring the old system back. They can't undo the foundation of the regulations. So instead, they're trying to control the effects. Limit the damage. Reduce the extremes. But that's not the same as solving the problem. It's managing it. And drivers know the difference. That's why this isn't just frustration anymore. It's resistance. Because they're not just adapting to a new system. They're questioning whether that system should exist at all. And that's a completely different situation. Because once that question is asked, everything changes. And what comes next is where the pressure truly explodes. And what comes next is where the pressure truly explodes. Because this is the moment everything shifts. From concern to confrontation. Drivers are no longer just giving feedback. They're demanding answers. Not quietly. Not diplomatically. Directly. Because after multiple races dealing with the same issues, the same risks, the same unpredictability, patience runs out. And when it does, Formula One becomes very loud. Max Verstappen didn't hold back. He didn't talk about small adjustments. He called the system wrong. Fundamentally wrong. Fernando Alonso went even deeper. He questioned whether this still feels like a real sport. Think about that. A driver with decades of experience, questioning the nature of Formula One itself. That's not criticism. That's a warning. And it didn't stop there. Drivers started comparing notes, sharing experiences, realizing they were all dealing with the same problem. Different cars, different teams, same issue. That's when it stops being individual. It becomes collective. And that's what the FIA fears most. Because one driver complaining is manageable. An entire grid aligning. That's pressure. Real pressure. And it builds fast. Meetings are requested. Discussions become tense. The Drivers' Association steps in. And suddenly, this is no longer about performance. It's about safety. Because once safety enters the conversation, everything changes. Arguments disappear. Excuses lose value. And decisions have to be made. But here's where it becomes even more intense. Because the drivers are not just pointing out problems. They're proposing solutions. Specific ones. Reduce electric deployment. Increase recharge rates. Limit extreme energy states. Even introduce mandatory warnings for sudden power loss. And every one of those proposals carries consequences. Because none of them are neutral. Each one shifts the balance. Each one creates winners and losers. So now the FIA is not just choosing how to fix the sport. They're choosing who benefits from that fix. And that's where the political tension reaches another level. Because teams are watching closely, listening, calculating. If the rules change, who gains? Who loses? And some teams are already in a strong position. They've mastered the system, optimized it, built their advantage around it. For them, this is not a crisis. It's an opportunity. So naturally, they resist change. Quietly, strategically. Because the more time passes, the bigger their advantage becomes. But for the teams struggling, time is the enemy. Every race without changes means falling further behind. And that creates conflict. Inside meetings. Inside negotiations. Inside the sport itself. Because now, Formula One is divided. Not just technically, politically, philosophically. What should this sport be? Pure racing? Or controlled performance? Driver instinct? Or system management? And there is no easy answer. Because both sides have arguments. Both sides have interests. But only one decision can be made. And while all of this tension builds behind closed doors, the outside world is watching. Fans, media, sponsors. And they're starting to notice something. This doesn't feel right. The racing looks strange. The battles don't last. The outcomes feel disconnected. And that perception spreads quickly. Because you don't need to understand the technical details to feel when something is off. And once that feeling spreads, it's very hard to stop. That's why the FIA is now under pressure from every direction. Drivers demanding safety. Teams fighting for advantage. Fans losing connection. And the business side watching the numbers drop. Because at the end of the day, this is not just a sport. It's an ecosystem. And right now, that ecosystem is unstable. So everything comes down to one critical moment. A decision. A set of changes. A response that will define what happens next. Because if the FIA gets this right, they can regain control. Stabilize the sport. Restore confidence. But if they get it wrong, if the changes are too small, too late, or simply ineffective, then this situation doesn't improve. It escalates. And that's when this stops being a difficult transition and becomes something much bigger. A defining mistake. The kind that doesn't just affect one season, but an entire era. And the closer they get to that decision, the more one reality becomes impossible to ignore. This is no longer about fixing a problem. It's about saving the identity of Formula One itself. And this is where everything finally comes together. Because at this point, it's no longer about what went wrong. It's about what happens next. The FIA is standing at a crossroads. One decision changes everything. And for the first time since these rules were introduced, they don't control the narrative anymore. The drivers do. The teams do. Even the fans do. Because trust is already damaged. And rebuilding it is much harder than creating it. Now think about the position they're in. If they make aggressive changes, they admit the system failed. Not indirectly. Not quietly. Clearly. And that has consequences. For credibility. For leadership. For the future of every decision they make. But if they don't change enough, if they try to protect the original idea, then the problems remain. The risks remain. The frustration grows. And that might be even worse. Because Formula One can survive a mistake. But it cannot survive losing confidence. That's the line they're walking right now. And it's thinner than ever. Because behind all the technical discussions, all the political negotiations, there's one truth that nobody can escape. This system changed what it means to race. Drivers are no longer in full control. They're managing limits, managing energy, managing constraints. And that shift is what created this entire crisis. Because Formula One was never supposed to feel controlled. It was supposed to feel raw, unpredictable, but in the hands of the driver, not the system. And that's why this moment is so important. Because what the FIA decides now will define what Formula One becomes next. Do they double down on technology, accept the complexity, and try to refine it over time? Or do they step back, rebalance the sport, and bring control back to the drivers? That's the real choice. Not just technical, philosophical. And there's no middle ground that satisfies everyone. Because whatever they choose, someone loses. Teams that built their advantage around this system could see it disappear overnight. Drivers who adapted quickly could lose that edge. Manufacturers who joined because of this vision could question their future. Everything is connected. Everything is at risk. And that's why Miami is not just another race. It's a verdict. The first real answer to everything that's happened. Because when those cars go out on track, everyone will be watching. Not just who wins, but how. Do the cars behave differently? Do the drivers push again? Does the racing feel real? Or does it still feel controlled? And within a few laps, everyone will know whether the FIA managed to stabilize this era, or whether the cracks are still there. Because if they are, this doesn't slow down. It accelerates. More criticism, more pressure, more division, until something bigger breaks. And that's the scenario nobody wants to reach. Because once that happens, there's no easy recovery. Only long-term damage. To the sport, to its identity, to its future. So now, everything depends on one thing. Execution. Not ideas. Not promises. Results. Because in Formula One, you don't get judged by what you planned. You get judged by what happens on track. And right now, the entire world is waiting to see if the FIA can turn this around. Or if this moment will be remembered as the point where everything started to fall apart.